Hi everyone. I'm very honored to be here and happy to be able to share this painting technique with you. I've written a tutorial to go along with this webinar. It has all the technical information, as Tanya said, so you don't have to take notes today for the test. Just kidding, there's no test. Tanya will email the tutorial to you tomorrow along with my customized brushes. You might want to check out some of my tutorial blog posts on my website, nomiwagner.com. I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of this webinar. I know that some of you have never been exposed to this kind of technology, and some of you know far more than I do. So please hang in here with me. I have a lot of information to share, and I hope everyone will experience something interesting. And watching me paint is like watching grass grow. So I'll do an overview and try my best to keep you awake. I've been working with Corel Painter since 1992, back when it was Fractal Painter version 2. My goal was to create traditional art using high-tech equipment and software. I've experimented with the pen and ink with watercolor technique several times. While I talk about basics, I'll show you a few examples of projects I've done with this technique, and then I'll get into the actual process. Pen and ink with watercolor is an ancient technique that both beginning and advanced artists have enjoyed. It's fun because not only is it fast, but also it can be whimsical or intense, contemporary or vintage. I've used this technique with store-bought pens, paper, and a few watercolor paints, but I think you'll see how much more flexibility I get by using Corel Painter. Not only is Painter like owning the world's largest art store, but also it gives me so much control and ways to change my art, save versions of my art, and take risks with my art, all without damaging my painting, and all before it's committed to paper. Okay. My drawings and paintings are created entirely in Corel Painter. The reference photos are cropped, composited, and color corrected in Adobe Photoshop. If I need to enlarge a photo, I use Alien Skin Blow Up 3, a Photoshop plugin. I learned how to use Painter by scanning in some favorite watercolor paintings from an art book. It was in the days well before all the examples of art could be viewed online. I opened a blank file next to each scan and replicated the painting stroke by stroke through trial and error. I knew I wouldn't be able to remember the technical details I was discovering, so I kept a little notebook by my side and wrote down every little thing I did in Painter. Every brush setting, paper texture, sizes, opacities, colors, etc. In this way, I became familiar with the use of Painter as it applied to my needs and the style I wanted to achieve. At about the same time, I enrolled in classes at a traditional art school. I had already taken life drawing classes, but I needed to learn how watercolor painting was actually done. Then I was better able to integrate traditional watercolor principles into my digital watercolor techniques. My normal files are set at the largest output I expect to be printing, often 30 by 40 inches at 240 ppi. Because we're doing this presentation live, my file size for this webinar is small, 6.5 by 8 inches. I always set the resolution at 240 ppi for good print quality. I paint in RGB using Painter RIF files and save the files in PSD format for printing. I upload my finished files to Dropbox. My husband, Jerry Bean, downloads the files and prints my work on either canvas or watercolor paper. I use a Wacom Intuos 5 touch stylus with a Wacom Medium graphics tablet. Using a Mac Pro, I work in front of two 27-inch Apple monitors, giving me plenty of room for lots of reference photos. The reference photo here on the left side of my monitor is of one of our 10 grandchildren, Violet Bean. I cropped this close-up from a family photo that I took last Christmas. Violet is a wonderful actress and stars in the deeply moving documentary Tower, streaming on Netflix. Violet also plays Jesse Quick, a superhero on the CW's The Flash. We're very proud and excited for Violet, and it's really helpful having a superhero in the family. Now I'll show you how I painted Violet's portrait. I first made a copy of the reference photo. To do this, I go to File, Quick Clone, and the copied photo comes in at a 50% opacity. Okay. So I can draw some strokes here for you. I use this. After experimenting with a lot of painter brushes for my pen and ink drawing, I customized a Painter charcoal brush. I've named the variant N's Charcoal Pen. I always put an N or Nomi in front of the variant names to differentiate them from Painter's default brushes. I made 5 of these brushes, numbered from 1 to 5. Here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, designating the width of the stroke. It's easier to just grab one rather than changing the size each time. Okay, let me show you this. I'll just show you one here. The stylus is pressure sensitive, so I can vary the intensity of my strokes. So here is this smallest, then 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you can see that. And then as for pressure sensitivity, you can push hard or soft or hard or soft. That's how I really love that feel to it. And I use simulated wood grain paper as my texture to get this interesting broken feel to the stroke. I like that. Okay. Now, let's see, we'll get onto this. Okay. To keep things easy for myself, I use the same custom palette for all my work. It contains my customized brushes, the 3 paper textures I use, and my most frequently used commands. In general, I try to keep my workspace simple so I can concentrate on my painting. Painter's tracing paper really helps me since I mostly paint commissioned portraits. When attempting to create let me put the tracing paper on here for you. I don't have it here. I'm in the wrong file. Okay, here we go. There we go. So I can turn it on or off. It really helps me since when attempting to create an accurate likeness of someone in a portrait, it's important to get each feature and contour in its correct anatomical location. We are all like snowflakes, identifiable by the exact amount of space between our features. In fact, this is how security software recognizes us. That seems kind of creepy to me, but I guess it's wonderful when you want to be identified. Okay, I'm going to show you something here. Get the tracing paper on. This. I'm going to turn the tracing paper down so you can see this a little, or up, turn the opacity up so you can see my stroke a little better. Okay, I'm going to enlarge this for you. Okay. So one day when I couldn't control my hand, my stroke, well, that's a little exaggerated, but it was not staying where it should. Okay, so I'm going to undo that for you. I discovered a little trick. Instead of looking exactly at where the cursor is on the drawing, I look ahead of the cursor at where I want the stroke to end up. My brain is fooled, my hand behaves, and my stroke goes where it should. I guess it's like pin spotting in bowling. Let me show you. So I'm going to be looking ahead. of where it should go instead of on it. I'm not looking at it at all. Voila! Okay. Oh, let's see. Let's go on to something else for you. Okay. My biggest challenge is not to overdo. Wait, I'm on the wrong one here. Let me go one more for you. My biggest challenge is to not overdo the pen and ink sketch, or it gets distracting. Less is more, not more is more, which I am apt to do, as you can see here. I'm finding that the drawing should be minimal, just essential contours and the significant features that define each person. The object of this technique is to be light and spontaneous, with a minimum of obvious effort. The good news is that I can go back in later and change or remove any part of my drawing or painting that I don't care for. Corel Painter provides me with a huge safety net. Boom. My layer list is located on the bottom right corner. Let me get into this file. Okay. On the bottom right corner of my monitor here. My drawing is on the bottom layer, and my watercolor painting is on this layer at the top using the gel composite method. With separate layers, I can change either the drawing or painting without doing harm to the other. I like to view the layers separately, so I put a layer of white between the painting and drawing. To do this, I click the little Add Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers palette, right here, New Layer. And I put that layer between the painting and the canvas, between the painting and the drawing. I fill it with white, so I make sure my color is up here at white, and I go Edit Fill or Command F, and I click OK. And then now I have a layer of white between the painting and the drawing, so I can turn it on. Let's see, how am I going to show you this? Oh, I think I did it in the wrong layer. I'll show you on a later one. But anyway, I can turn the drawing on or off and see the painting separately. I think I moved things around crazily. Okay, let's go on. Let's see. Yeah, I need to show my painting. That's the problem. I mess things up. Let's see. Let me do an undo and see if that'll help. There we go. Okay, so here's that layer one. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to fill it with white. Edit. Fill. Yay! Okay, so now you can see. Okay, so now I can turn this white off or on to see the drawing or not, because sometimes that drawing gets in my way, and I really want to see what I've done with the painting. Okay, good. I never know where to start a painting, and though a blank canvas is thrilling, like a clean notebook on the first day of a school semester, it can be intimidating. But I jump in and find something I think I can do. Eyes, shadows, hair maybe. It's different each time. I just keep going. Get a color for you. I just keep going, sometimes getting stuck. I'm in the wrong layer, of course. Okay. Sometimes getting stuck and moving to a different feature. But as one stroke leads to another, the painting comes together and takes on a life of its own. It's a fascinating process, and perseverance is the key. I frequently do a save as so that I have a record of the work in progress and can refer or go back to a previous version. To pick my colors from the color panel, which I'll move out here to make more visible for you, I choose a hue from this hue ring, which is like a color wheel around this color triangle. The left edge of the triangle has all the gray tones from white up here down to black. The most saturated color is here at the apex of the triangle. The darker color values lie between the saturated apex and the black apex point. The lighter color tints can be found up here between the white apex point and the saturated point. The midtones are in the body of the triangle. I mix the colors on my virtual canvas as I paint. Okay, I'll show you. I use a lot of keyboard shortcuts to retouch, to resize my brushes. I use Option Command, so I can, let me get a darker color for you so you can really see this. I can make a very large stroke or a very teeny little stroke, but just with Option Command, so that I can change the brush size on the fly without having to look at a slider. In Preferences Customize Key, I customize the X key as a keyboard shortcut to dry the digital watercolor between layers of color. In art school, we had to use hair dryers to do this. So let me show you here. So I paint, and then I'm hitting that X, drying, dry. And you can see the layers of translucent color just build up each time I dry. Okay. For convenience and comfort when using the stylus, my right hand rests on the graphics tablet. My left hand rests on the work surface, and my left index, middle, and ring fingers hover over the lower left area of my keyboard. I'm not conscious of any of this. It happens automatically after all these years of digital painting, and I gratefully don't have any problems with my hands or wrists. Basic paper is the texture I use for most of my painting. You can find the textures up here in the paper library. I've made a few customized variants of Painter's new simple water brush, changing the stroke type to rake. I use a couple watercolor erasers and some dry erasers for corrections or highlights. Okay, let me show you this. Oh. I work both wet into wet. Wet, you can even change the color. Wet into wet. And I can erase with a wet eraser. Maybe I should make this larger so you can see what I'm doing here. So I was painting with wet and then erasing with a wet eraser. Okay. I also paint wet over dry. So I'll dry that and get some pink. And here's the, so I'll dry that. And if I need to erase, I'll use one of my dry erasers. We'll go in here. Let's get we'll get a whopper one. Okay. Also, I like to achieve a lost and found style, showing both wet fringed and diffused areas. So let me show you this. I'll go into this nasolabial line over here. I'll follow the line on the drawing right there. And then I, so that, I'll make it big so you can see the hard edge. That's the wet fringe from this brush. Okay. Now, there's also, well, let me dry that and show you how that works. So I can go back in there and do some more of that. Okay, and then if I want to blend it, dry it again, and I use a nice soft blender stump. I would just blend this edge of it, not the other. So let me turn off the drawing so you can see what I'm getting here. So you see there's a hard edge and then a soft edge. So I use both, lost and found. Okay, when I do use the blender, I like to switch to the hot press texture. It's a little softer than the basic. Okay, and it feels like I'm sculpting with color when I do this. I can just push the color around, and it's just so much fun. Okay, now let me get that drawing back on, because I want to show you about noses. Painting noses is fun because they're three-dimensional. As I paint in the highlights and shadows, the nose emerges from the plane of the face. A core shadow goes down the length of the nose where the highlight touches the shadow. Core shadows are always the areas with the most highly saturated color. So let me try and look at Violet's photo and do some painting here for you. Told you it's like grass growing. Okay, I'll dry that and then get a little darker with it. And dry and blend. And then I like to always put some pink down at the bottom right here, extra darker. Yeah, get this little line in there and get some down here. You can see that. I'll show you. Let me turn this off, this drawing off. Okay, I'll go back to the painting, and then I like to blend it a little bit. And then I wanted to show you that core shadow, which is really important. I learned in art school. So I would go to, I'm going to exaggerate here, but this is the, so this is the shadow. I'll make it even darker for you. Make the shadow dark. And dry that. And then you see a highlight here. So where the shadow hits the highlight, this is the saturated color that I was taught to put in at this point between the two. Okay, so I want to show you one other thing. The where the cartilage hits the bone, there's cartilage out to the end, and then it hits bone, and there's usually a little division that you see, and that's nice to remember. And then I want to show you how I get a highlight. So I'll cover up the white, as I always do. I forget to leave the white. Okay, and then I'm going to dry it, and then I can go back in with an eraser and get that highlight back in. Get this highlight back in. And you just play with this back and forth, in and out. Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, now, features are obviously very different from person to person. But features are also very different on the same person, from one side of the face to the other. It is important to draw and paint what you see and not what you think a feature should look like. Having been trained as a portrait photographer, I learned the importance of a proper lighting pattern on the face. I have to keep remembering that creating a good likeness in a portrait is less about painting tiny details and more about painting the way the light is falling on the bone structure and the shadows it creates. My goal is not to reproduce the photograph, but rather to use it as a reference, just a starting point in expressing my own vision of the subject. In painting traditional watercolors, it is critical to leave the white of the paper, and as I said, I usually forget. That is what is so great for me about painting digitally. I can always go back using digital erasers and put in highlights and whites in those areas. Cheater, cheater, cheater. Okay. When painting eyes, let me get larger in here. It is, I learned to blend the edges of the pupils into the whites of the eye to show the natural moisture of our eyes. The whites of our eyes aren't actually white because of the blood supply, so I'm conscious of the values and colors. I paint some pinkish red in the corners of each eye. If there are specular highlights from flash photos, I repaint the highlights in the eyes, well, with an eraser, so the paintings are less photorealistic. Eyelids are generally a kind of light purple or magenta, and I blend the top and bottom edges of the eyebrows to soften them. I study the growth pattern of each subject's eyelashes and keep them soft. The shadow areas adjacent to the mouth are the most critical for getting good expression. John Singer Sargent, the extraordinary portrait painter, was quoted as saying, "A portrait is a painting that has something wrong with the mouth." And he was right. Mouths are deceiving and don't appear that difficult at first glance. But lips have very few discernible edges, little contrast, mostly rolled edges, ambiguous shadows and highlights, and many shades of color. And then there are the teeth and the spaces between and behind them. I was taught to partially blur the lines between the teeth, but having been a dental hygienist for 18 years out of college, I have a compulsion to show off my knowledge of dental anatomy. For me, painting with Corel Painter is very Zen-like because it feels like color and water are flowing onto my paper. I love the experience and I get lost in it. Just like painting with regular brushes, paint, and water, digital watercolor is spontaneous. I never know exactly how a stroke will behave or how the colors will mix. That's what makes it feel like natural media, unpredictable, mysterious, and also strangely calming. Violet's portrait, let me change this next one. Violet's portrait took about 6 hours. This was an all-time speed record for me. When Tanya invited me to do this webinar, she needed to use one of my finished portraits right away for the Corel announcement. Well, I wanted to demonstrate this technique with a new painting so that I could then better explain the process. And as a typical grandma, I wanted to brag about Violet's accomplishments. So I got it done in a flash. But my portraits are not exactly done in a flash, as Corel's clever reference to Violet's TV show suggests. My usual digital watercolor portraits are very detailed, and it can sometimes take days for me to paint each person. I always do preliminary drawings as a guide for my regular portraits, but the drawings don't generally show as they do with this technique. During the work in progress, I can go back at any time into either the drawing or watercolor layers to make adjustments. I can erase, lighten, or emphasize some of the pen and ink lines. Under the Effects menu, Tonal Control, I frequently lighten or darken the whole painting, or I can increase the saturation. You can't easily do this on a regular watercolor painting. Painting digitally gives me the ability to change a painting even after it's ostensibly done. And it allows me to take risks because I know I can always go back and rescue my whole portrait or clone back just a part of it from a previously saved version. After I click Drop All, here are all the layers. So in the Layers panel, I click Drop All right there to flatten. I can always blend layers to lose unnecessary hard lines and edges. I always blend areas of the hair into the background so people don't look like cutouts. Here, I'll show you. Let's see. Just do this a little bit to show you. And then I can add some color for more background. You can do all sorts of things. It's not over till it's over. And then it's not over. Having digital control means that you can still be creative and make changes even after your artwork is supposedly complete, which is very comforting. But there is a hazard in this for an artist like me. They say that it takes 2 people to do a painting, one to paint and one to say, stop. Every time I look at Violet's finished portrait, I see something I could or should have done better. But when I get too perfectionistic with a painting, it becomes less painterly and starts to lose life. A big lesson for me has been to let go. The pen and ink with watercolor technique is all about staying loose. I find Corel Painter to be extremely stable, but many other things can cause a crash. I advise you to save your work every 20 minutes or so. I prefer to do a save as so that I have a record of the work in progress. Make sure you back up your work a few times a day. I save each archive file at my studio as well as off-site and also in the cloud, wherever that is. File heaven, I guess. I once heard that painting is hard, painting portraits is the hardest, and painting commissioned portraits is a form of insanity. Well, that's probably true, and although it's never easy for me, I love doing this work. It's gratifying to provide clients with portraits of their loved ones. For me, it is thrilling to paint someone's portrait and see their character emerge. Each new stroke is a problem to solve, feeding my love of learning and need for challenges. It fascinates me and fulfills my creative needs like nothing else ever has. Each commission is unique, so every project is fresh and new. Without the genius minds at Painter and their generosity in helping me over the years, I never would have had this long and exciting career as a digital artist. I'm grateful to Jerry for introducing me to the Painter software and for always giving me the moral and technical support to pursue my dream. I'm so appreciative of the help I've received from Tanya and my precious friends Melinda and Judy. And thank you, dear Violet, for letting me show off your beauty and talent. Thank you, everybody.
All right, Nomi. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. I've been trying to track some of the questions that have come through here. And we've had, are you ready to answer questions before I jump right in?
We had what? A what?
Are you ready to answer the questions?
Oh, okay.
So many people asked, how did you dry your watercolor?
That was, well, you hit under the layers. Here, let me do this. Under layers, you go down here and it says dry digital watercolor. And I've made the special, changed the X key so that I can just hit X every time I want to do it. Or on my palette here, it says I put the command dry digital watercolor. So there are 3 ways I can do it. But the X with my, let's see, what is it? My middle finger, I guess, hits the X. It's just so automatic and I can do it so fast. So I don't have to stop and think about it. Does that answer the question? Is that what they were asking?
And okay. Just to add on to that, I'm not sure how many people are aware that you can actually set up all of your keyboard shortcuts in preferences. You can print out Painter's default keyboard shortcuts, and you can also make adjustments to any if you prefer to change them to a different keyboard command. So it's a nice little tip, and then creating that custom palette gives you easy access to all of those.
Oh, yes.
So there were lots of questions because of your custom palette, and I know that you were kind enough to provide all of your brushes. But people were wondering, for instance, what brush were you using when you painted the hair? Were you using the brush for most of the process?
Yeah, I use it for everything. It's this, what's it called? Nomi's NSW. I think that's the name you have. It's the new Simple Water, which was new about 20 years ago. And these are numbers that I had at one time. I don't even know if I use those numbers for opacity and size and stuff. Anyway, this is the brush. This is my go-to brush for everything.
Okay, fantastic. So I did.
And then, I'm sorry, wait a minute. And then there's a tiny one. It's just smaller in size to the left of it. I included that one. And then I have one that has a diffused edge to it, not a, what do you call it, wet fringe. So I included all 3 of those in what I sent to you.
Great. Wonderful. That should answer the questions. There was a question. I know it's digital watercolor by default. There's opacity. Did you adjust any of the opacity levels for your custom brushes?
Um, yeah, oh yeah, I use it at 15%, I guess. You know, made all these so long ago. Yeah, they're all at 15%
Oh, okay.
opacity. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so funny. I've been multitasking the whole time answering questions.
How do you do that?
I didn't even notice that you had the property bar down on the bottom there. Okay, fantastic.
Oh, oh yeah, that's important.
And with your color selection, I know that you created a quick clone, but you're not using cloning to paint, correct?
No, correct,
So do you
correct.
just mix up, do you sample from the original image, or do you just mix up the colors on your own?
No, I can't, I've never been able to get good color from sampling from the photo. Photo color has that grayish cast to it or something. It's rare that I can get a good color from a photo. So no, I just make it up on my own.
Okay,
Just go around here and just figure it out. Yeah.
because you're very talented.
I'm what?
You're very talented.
Oh, it's just all these years. If you do the same thing for 20 some years, day in and day out, you kind of get good at it. It's just automatic.
Yeah, well, you're definitely good at it. And everybody, we also have color sets. So I don't know if you all know anybody that creates color sets that you can import for things like portraits, but there's a bunch of different ways that you can mix up color. Color mixer, you can pull colors from images and create color sets, or you can actually mix up paint and create your own color set. So that's a lot of information, but something for you all to look into if you're further interested in a variety of ways to obtain color in Painter. Let's see here. Oh, this is a good one. How do you find commission portrait work? I know you've been doing this for quite some time, and at this point, people probably flock to you.
I wish. They fly to me a little bit at a time. They find me on the internet now. Everything has changed. When I first started, they were all local in Southern California, and I would donate to a lot of charity auctions, and they'd find me that way. And now I actually do charity auctions online through Bidding for Good. But most of my clients just find me on Google. My website has wonderful SEO. I use the final code for my web, and they're terrific. And people are able to find me just looking for a portrait painter. So that has really helped it. But everything has flip-flopped from the beginning. People used to drive to me, and I would take their portraits, since I was a photographer, and then paint from my own photos that I would scan in. But now people just email me their photos, usually from their iPhones. Not always the greatest photos, but I do the best I can. And well, you can see a lot of this on my website, but I combine different photos into one painting. It's challenging, but I thrive on challenges. So yeah, the internet has changed everything for me.
Yes, I think it has changed the entire world. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with, I have to say.
Okay. Oh yeah, I don't keep up, but I do the best I can here. I just do my same thing over and over that I've done for years. My painting hasn't really changed. My technique is really the same, and that way I can concentrate on each new photo that I get and do the best I can instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. But I do really enjoy this technique with the pen and ink and watercolor because I can be looser, and as I'm getting older, my energy is waning, and this is going to really come in handy for me because I can't spend 8-10 hours sitting here doing a portrait. It's just impossible at this age. So I love this new technique. I hope to do much more of it.
Great. Well, thanks for teaching us all more about your technique. There's so many questions coming in right now. So everybody, if we don't have the opportunity to answer all of them, I will follow up after the session. So Joy is wondering, and because I wasn't following every single step you were doing. Do you typically paint on just one layer, or do you have multiple layers?
Oh, when I'm doing a portrait like this with the background as part of the portrait, I just paint on one painting layer. Then, let's see, I have to explain what I do. Once I'm finished with, say I'm finished with this portrait, I send it over to my husband Jerry, and he goes into a Photoshop plugin. What's it called, Jerry? To extract. He'll think of it. Anyway, anyway, he extracts my portrait from the white background. Then I bring the portrait back in and I put it on a new layer. Then I make another painting layer under that layer, and I have the new layer is for the background, and it's a gel layer. I revert the extracted portrait to a default layer. So in that case, I'm painting on two different layers, a background layer and a portrait layer. So I can go, so it's really great because I put my backgrounds in behind people and I don't have to go around them and worry about messing them up. But then when I'm all finished and I flatten everything, I generally blend the edges so people don't look like cutouts. What was it, Jerry?
Vertis Fluid Mask.
Vertis Fluid Mask is what Jerry uses to extract my portraits from the background when I want to put a separate background behind them. Oh, that was a lot.
Jerry, I have Jim Wrestler. I don't know if I'm saying that name right, but he said to say hello to you.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Jim.
Okay, so more questions. How did you create this composite that you're showing here?
Oh, in Photoshop.
Okay.
I dragged in all the various stages. There were a lot more stages. There were about twice as many as this, but I had to just keep honing it down because my presentation was confusing me, and as it is, I have my friend Judy standing patiently next to me to keep me on track here because it was really hard to go from image to image and also say what I wanted to say and paint at the same time. So right and left brains were really fighting it out today, I tell you.
Well, you did a great job. This is an interesting question from Lamar. He said that he's a traditional oil painter artist and he's been using Corel Painter to paint his portraits, but he feels like he's cheating. So,
oh, that's what I said. Cheater, cheater, cheater.
yeah, he wonders, do you feel like you're cheating? And if so, how do you handle this emotion? Or do you just enjoy it and...
Oh, obviously I love what I'm doing. But I have to tell you, Lamar, at the beginning and actually up until pretty recently, I would have to say, people would say, well, how do you do these? And I'd have to say, I use a computer, it was kind of slur my words. And because when I was so excited when I first started this, way back in the late 90s. And I was starting to show people. And they say, oh, that's so cool. I love that portrait. And how'd you do it? And I said, oh, well, I did it with a computer. And they would physically turn away and walk away from me. And it was so repulsive and repugnant to people back then. But I'm just thankful I lived this long to see people appreciate the fact that I can do this digitally, and we all can. And, everybody having an iPhone on them or, a phone and a camera and being so much into technology, people, whether they want to be or not, you have to be nowadays. So people are so much more accepting of this. And so I'm so proud of it now. And actually, with that Strawberry Festival poster, it was the first year they accepted digital art. And I won over 70 people, all kinds of artists. And it was just, the best part of it was that I won as a digital artist and was recognized as a digital artist finally. So it's just been a tremendous boon to me. It's increased my self-confidence, and I'm just walking proud. So Lamar, I understand. I totally understand where you're coming from. But this is a good thing. You know, even back in the Renaissance, they used optics, Caravaggio, Raphael, they used all kinds of tricks. And traditional painters today use projectors to project an image onto a canvas. So what difference does it make if you use a stylus or a paintbrush or a toothbrush or a toothpick? You know, the thing is, it's a tool, and do people like your art, and are you enjoying doing it? That's what it's all about, really. So do both, or just one, Lamar, whatever you want, and I wish you the best of luck with it.
Thanks, Nomi. Karen is wondering, she sees in your custom palette that you have 2 additional paper textures, and she's wondering when you choose to use those.
Yeah, as I said, this is the simulated wood grain, and that's when I want that broken stroke in my drawings. This is the basic paper, my all go-to standby texture, and this is the hot press that I use when I'm blending things if I want a softer, smoother blend. Just those 3.
And when you go to print, Kathy was wondering, she heard you say you print on watercolor paper, but is it hard press, cold press, any particular kind of paper you recommend?
What kind of paper, Jerry? It's just Epson.
Depends, canvas or a watercolor.
What kind of watercolor paper with Epson? They want to know.
Well, Epson hot press or cold press.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter. It's a watercolor paper.
Epson watercolor paper, hot press or cold press. I don't know. I'm not getting a good answer here.
Well, it can use any
He's used so many different things.
But it depends on the printer who's printing it.
Yeah, it depends on your printer, the person who's printing.
Okay.
They always look good. They always look good. Yeah.
And there are some questions, just, you know, is it necessary to have a drawing tablet versus painting with a mouse?
Yes. Unequivocally. Painting with a mouse, for me anyway, is like painting with a brick. I don't even know how to use a mouse anymore. I do everything with this stylus. And you get the precision and the control, and I could not do what I do with a mouse, for sure.
I agree. I think it's just a world of difference. You have no pressure with the mouse, and it makes it very hard to control the natural media. All right. So Kathy just made a comment that she's used Photoshop for some of her work, but she found that Corel Painter is so much better for painting. Do you agree, Nomi?
Oh, yeah. There's no question. Photoshop is wonderful, and I use it for color correction and compositing, you know, changing heads on people and in portraits and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to painting, there's no comparison, because the 2 programs respect each other, and they know what they're good at, and and it's fine to use both and go back and forth. They have their strengths. So definitely Painter for painting.
We always get these questions, you know, there's people that are still trying to learn Painter, and they wonder, you know, do you have any recommendations on a good learning resource for getting started?
Well, as I said, I scanned in, well, now you don't have to scan things in anymore, but I scanned in some of my favorite paintings and then had a blank canvas next to them and did everything, just went through every brush in the whole library, everything, until I could figure out how to replicate exactly how that painting looked. And then, as I said, I wrote down everything. You couldn't make notes online then, so I wrote it in a little tablet, and that's how I learned. Of course, I went to art school, and I knew, you know, all about photography, and I knew how to draw. I'd learned how to draw from drawing on the right side of the brain classes. So all that helps, of course. I took in school, at UCLA, I learned color theory, graphic design, Photoshop. I just took classes in everything that I felt I was lacking, and then put it all together so that I could do this work. And I bought every art book that I could find. Now it's all online, so much information, but back then I would either spend hours at the library or buy books that I needed. Every book that every teacher recommended I have here. So, and I read every one of them. So there's a lot of work to learn how to do this, but believe me, it's worth it. It is so much fun. So fulfilling.
Okay, I've got a few more. And in a few minutes we'll stop the questions, and I think we will have addressed all of them. Is there a particular reason that you choose to use charcoal instead of an ink brush for your sketch?
Yeah, I couldn't find an ink brush back then when I was learning this, figuring this out. There may be one now, but I couldn't find one that did what I wanted it to. So I changed the charcoal brush into what I call my ink pen. That's all. If somebody else comes up with something better for me about any of this, please let me know, because I'm always learning and wanting to improve. So don't hesitate to come up with some suggestions for me, please.
And this is a great question too, because I know in addition to portraits, in a lot of your portraits, you have beautiful landscapes in the background. And I'm scanning, I can't remember the name of the person that asked this, but they're wondering, oh, it's Cindy. Would most of these techniques you're showing here today also transfer over into landscape painting?
Yeah. Cindy, I'm a one-trick pony. I only know how to do what I showed you today. And I do it the same thing for everything, landscapes, everything I do, portraits, babies, the whole deal. Yeah. I try not to make things complicated. It's hard enough to just do what I do. So yeah, same thing over and over, but it's always with something new and fresh, so it's exciting.
Bonnie's wondering how you got the little red cursor.
It's the, what's it called, legacy icon, something like that, red triangle in the preferences, and it's set at a 315 degree angle, right. Yeah, this is what I've used from the beginning, so I just go back to it. And it shows up on everything, so I like it.
Yeah, it really does.
And the point works, so, it points at the right thing. So, yeah, it works for me.
There's a few questions in regards of, you mentioned 240 DPI for your work. Is that what you always use, even when you're sending it to print?
Always, because we print everything, and Jerry always wants 240 PPI from the beginning.
And do you know what Epson printer you're using?
Jerry, what Epson printer are you using now? The new one. What's the new one?
Oh, it's a SP8000.
SP8000.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, one last question, and I'm going to just answer this verbally because many people are asking, is this available later? Yes, you will get a link to the recording on YouTube. And for those of you that are asking about Nomi tutorials, I'll let you answer what else you may have. People are asking for paid tutorials even, but Nomi was kind enough to create a tutorial of this session in PDF format. I'm going to give that to you and the brushes. And the final question that we're taking here, because we're at the top of the hour, is what is the reason that you go into Photoshop to finish things off?
Oh, I don't know. I just always have.
I can give you one.
Please.
And it could have to do with your printer, but Painter is RGB color format. So in many cases, people go into Photoshop to convert to CMYK.
No, we print in RGB, so that's.
So, it's really a personal preference.
Yeah, I just always have. I just turn them into Photoshop files at the end, and Jerry prints either TIFF or Photoshop, but you can't print RIF. So, right. But I love working in RIF, and that's Painter's native file.
Yeah.
You might be able to.
All right. Well, that completes our session here today. Nomi, thank you.
You were asking about tutorials, and there's lots of information on my website. I've written a lot of things on there.
Here for everybody, because Nomi has a wonderful website. I know a lot of you also wanted to see more of her work. She has beautiful samples there. She has a great blog. So just go to nomiwagner.com and you'll find out more information about Nomi. And do you have any other recommendations for them, Nomi?
Yes.
Mhm.
Draw, 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 draw. There's a whole tutorial on drawing on my website, and it's so important. It's the basis for all kinds of art, any kind of art, and the more drawing you do, the better you'll get. And it's amazing. And you don't know something until you draw it. You don't really see it until you draw it. So that's all, folks.
Practice makes perfect, right?
Right.
Okay, well, thank you so much again, Nomi. This was great. Everybody, we will follow up. I'll have this posted on YouTube end of day. You'll get all the links and content tomorrow. And I hope to see you next month. We'll be posting, I'll send the information about the next webinar that we have coming up. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, Nomi. And
Thanks, Tanya.
enjoy your lunch and relax.
Thank you. We're celebrating.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the webinar. I'll talk to you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.